Hi, this is Desi K. Robinson with Environment TV Weekly News. I'm sitting here as an urban belle and a diva farmer and a health and lifestyle journalist on East 6th Street between Avenues A and B in a lovely, lovely, beautiful place called the Creative Little Garden. And I am really feeling kind of wonderful about this space, and it makes me think of the work that I do with youth around New York City, particularly around health and social justice. And so when I think about this Lower East Side area and how blighted this area used to be and how infested with drugs and neglect many of the residents were, it's interesting and it's wonderful to see these really beautiful spaces and these gardens that are almost on every block. And so I would love to see that happening in more of our underserved neighborhoods and our underserved areas. And so when I think of places like the Bronx and places like Brownsville that have the highest rates of asthma and the highest rates of health disparities in the country, I would love to see more green spaces and more opportunities for those communities to be able to really feel invested where they are. And so my concern is these areas have really become beautiful, lush, green, and speak to a lifestyle that is very much part of a tale of two New York cities. And so I want to make sure that as we continue to inform communities and educate communities around green spaces and around environmental issues, that those spaces continue to work for the people that live there, and the people that live there can continue to benefit from them. I don't want to see those spaces grow and become green and beautiful and lush, and the residents are no longer able to afford to live there. So as I sit here and think about the young people that I serve, I also serve on the board of Urban Assembly Affairs for Green Careers, high school here in New York City. I want to continue to impart on young people as well as educators and politicians and community leaders about spaces that really need to improve and grow and create food sources for food deserts around New York City's underserved areas, and have them continue to grow and thrive for the citizens and the residents that live there and not have them be pushed out. Thanks very much. I'm here with Environment TV Weekly News.
This is the Environment TV Weekly News. I'm Rebecca Miles reporting from Manhattan this week. Where I'm standing is the Creative Little Garden. It's on 6th Street between Avenues A and B, about 30 blocks away from the Empire State Building, if you can believe it. And right next to me is a willow tree of the kind of height it's not quite the Empire State Building, but it's pretty close. And you're wondering why a willow tree is growing in the middle of Manhattan. Well, right around this neighborhood, 2 centuries back, used to be marshland. Clipper ships used to come up to Avenue A, and the shipbuilders built a local church using some of their carpentry there, and that's still here today. This community garden was reclaimed by residents that lived in the neighborhood in 78. There was originally a building here that burnt down. There were many buildings that burnt down, and those are now, most of them, community gardens if they weren't rebuilt. And volunteers got leases from the city to develop them into community spaces, to bring something beautiful in the neighborhood, and they actually act like lungs, quiet lungs that you can kind of come and help and hang out in. The Daily News recognized this garden in 2012 as the best community garden, and the National Wildlife Federation recognizes this garden, and to get that title you have to put out food, water and shelter for birds. And I don't know if you can hear, but there are incredible birds twittering all over the place.
This is Environment TV News. I'm Ken Gale, reporting weekly from New York City. The Center for Biological Diversity has an article and a Huffington Post op-ed about a new study led by conservation biologist Dr. Stuart Pym of Duke University that finds that wildlife are going extinct at a pace not seen in millions of years, 1,000 times faster than normal rate. The primary drivers are human population growth and increased resource consumption. This isn't the first time such an article has been written, just the latest in a very long line of warnings from scientists. The Center for Biological Diversity also quotes an article by Mark Hertzgaard in The Nation, saying that the Obama administration's new plan to cut global warming pollution from power plants simply doesn't go far enough. And I certainly agree with that. The reduction in carbon dioxide from the new regulations is very small, too small. It also doesn't address methane leaks from all those natural gas pipelines throughout the US. Methane is a much worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, 100 times worse in the short run, 20 times worse in the long run. The Nation article is basically, it's better than nothing and maybe it will be a good start. Well, Mark is more optimistic than I am.
75 scientists working in a US federal government laboratory in Atlanta may have been exposed to live anthrax bacteria and are being offered treatment to prevent infection, according to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The Guardian newspaper reported the potential exposure occurred after researchers working in a high-level biosecurity laboratory at the agency's Atlanta campus failed to follow proper procedures to inactivate the bacteria. They then transferred the samples, which may have contained live bacteria, to lower security CDC labs not equipped to handle live anthrax. Dr. Paul Meacham, the director of the Environmental Health and Safety Compliance Office at the CDC, and said the agency discovered the potential exposure on the evening of Friday the 13th and immediately began contacting individuals working in the labs who may have unknowingly handled live anthrax bacteria. Meacham said no employee had shown any symptoms of anthrax illness. He said normally the incubation period can take up to 5 to 7 days, though there are documented cases of illnesses occurring some 60 days after exposure. Meacham said as many as 7 researchers may have come into direct contact with live anthrax, but the agency is casting as wide a net as possible to make sure all employees at the agency who may have walked in any of the labs at risk are being offered treatment.
And this past Wednesday, I spoke at the City Council hearing on June 18th, assessing the economic impact of New York's failing infrastructure. Hearing number 1, gas, water, and steam. At this hearing, they had people from the Water and Sewage Department explaining about the water leaks in New York City. There's over 400 water main leaks over a year, and in fact, in 15 of the last 16 years, there have been over 400 water main breaks. That's averages more than one a day. And so the city council people were asking what was going on. You had the chairman of the Committee on Economic Development, the Committee on Environmental Protection, and the Committee on Consumer Affairs. After the people from the Water and Sewage Department spoke, most of the other city council people left, and it was just the chairs, and they interviewed a representative from Con Edison and another one from National Grid about their leaks. They were much more evasive in some of their answers than the people who were working in the government already. They will not give the information of where in the city most of the leaks have been reported. Why that is, of course, we can only conjecture. Is it because it'll show that some neighborhoods have more leaks than others? Some neighborhoods have unreported leaks. Some neighborhoods have leaks that don't get fixed. Don't know why, but they refuse to release maps of where the leaks occur to the city council. Meanwhile, also this past Wednesday, the mayor put out a report, did not tell the city council. Right? They were as surprised as anybody that this report exists. Because it takes 22 minutes on average for Con Ed to respond to a report of a gas leak, but the fire department reports in only 8 minutes, they have decided to take all reports of leaks and give them over to the fire department. 33,000 reports a year. And most of those reports are for inside apartments, not out on the street or in the basement of a building. So the city council people want to know, if we're going to add 33,000 more calls to the fire department, we need to know where those leaks occur, where they're reported from, because we have to figure out the more work that the fire department is going to have. And shouldn't Con Ed be paying the fire department for the work that the fire department is doing for them that they no longer have to do? There was also a person reporting from something he actually released the day before the East Harlem explosion called Center for an Urban Future, Caution Ahead. And that's available at this website. And he talked about the water leaks, he talked about the gas infrastructure, he talked about a lot of problems going on in the city. Some of his numbers contradict the people from Con Edison and National Grid. And so there's discussion about where those numbers occur, because New York City has twice as many gas leaks as other cities do. And then after that, the public spoke. And the public was limited mostly to 2 minutes. And clearly we're getting a little less attention from the people in the city council. You see a lot of looking around, you know. And I was the last person to speak. And all of those testimonies are on the web. Everything is on the web these days. So go to this website and you can look at all the different testimonies. A lot of details. So if you really want to know what happened this past Wednesday at the City Council, go there. This is Ken Gale for the Environment TV News, a mile and a half southeast of the Empire State Building in this beautiful garden that Rebecca already told you about.
In a related story, a Princeton University study shows that hundreds of thousands of abandoned oil wells are adding to the state's pollution. The study, entitled CO2 Methane Brine Leakage Through Subsurface Pathways, Exploring Modeling, Measurement and Policy Options, is the first of its kind study from Mary Klang that describes how abandoned oil wells serve as leakage pathways for carbon dioxide, methane, brine and more. Based on records, CAN estimates that between 280,000 and 970,000 abandoned wells account for 4 to 13% of the state's methane emissions.
The UN Secretary General released a statement on June 5th calling for more investment and commitment in sustainable energy. To me, the statement was mostly empty talk and greenwashing. I read quite a few UN press releases about conservation, and I'm amazed at the sheer amount of greenwashing. Countries whose governments are allowing massive destruction of their forests are putting out press releases about forest protection, and the UN sends these press releases out as if there isn't any deforestation going on. I haven't heard as many tirades against the UN from conservatives lately. Maybe they finally realized the UN is on their side.
And in New York this week, the New York State Assembly passed a moratorium on fracking. The New York Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver said, "We've heard from thousands of residents across the state about many issues associated with hydrofracking, and prudent leadership demands that we take our time to address these concerns. We do not need to rush into this. The natural gas deposits within the Marcellus Shale are not going to go anywhere," said Silver, end quote. The Assembly passed a 3-year moratorium of oil and natural gas drilling permits by an 89-34 count to allow for more time to study the environmental impact of the practice. The state has been under a fracking moratorium since 2008, with the most recent one passed in 2013. It would have expired in 2015. Full passage of the moratorium now depends on New York State and ultimately Governor Andrew Cuomo. The Associated Press reports that the Senate is unlikely to address the issue before adjournment later this week.
also mention the fracking moratorium in New York State also means that the leases that the oil and gas companies have already taken out will be sort of put on hold for 3 years. So if a homeowner has a lease to allow fracking on their property for 10 years, that lease is now for 13 years because the 3-year moratorium doesn't count in those 10 years. So the moratorium isn't all good just for fractivists, it's also good for oil and gas companies. Tricky situation.
A new study recently released by the University of Rochester researchers indicates that air pollution exposure may have a negative impact on mental health and could possibly play a role in schizophrenia and autism. The university study was published in the journal Environmental Health Perspectives. The researchers found that air pollution causes inflammation in the brains of newly born mice, which damage the development of white matter. The same parts of the brain are known to be affected in humans exhibiting autism and schizophrenia traits. The university's researchers said that when mice are exposed to extra fine particle air pollution in the first few weeks of life, they developed neurological abnormalities similar to those seen in humans with the 2 health disorders. The abnormalities are mostly found in male mice, which also corresponds to the high numbers of men and boys diagnosed with both schizophrenia and autism.